Welcome back, everybody. My name is Chaz, and of course, this is my channel, Bookish Chaz. And I have the amazing Pat Green with me here today to discuss his book, Hearts of Glass Living in the Real World. And I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about that book. But I do want to let you know if you are in the Chicago area, let's see if I can get this up here. He is having a book launch event for his new book. This is a pre-release book right now. It's releasing on April 5th. So if you're in the area, copy this down for Fountaindale Public Library and go to his launch event. I'm sure he would love it, and uh, I'm really excited to see his book take off and get seen and reach the people it's meant to reach. So make sure you check that out if you get a chance. And I will, once this video goes live, I will be putting a copy of this launch event in the description of the video as well. So let's turn it over to Pat. Pat, go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Oh my goodness. My name is Pat Green. I'm purely Gen X. I was born in 70, grew up mostly in the Chicagoland area. Um, this is a question that I always used to have a prepared canned answer for, but it was so full of BS. At the end of the day, I'm a dad and I'm a guy who's just trying to do my best. I have a cat. His name is Biddy. He's blind and he's a little bit psychotic, and that's pretty much my life. I work, I write, I'm passionate about equality, I'm an activist, and that sometimes gets me in trouble. And one of the most important advocacies that I work on is mental health, because that's something that is that I have mental health issues, and I want those concerns addressed for myself and everybody else. And I have learned that if you speak openly about that, other people do too. So I'm passionate about many things. When I'm at home, I listen to records and enjoy what I consider to be healthy nostalgia.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. And that's a good summation of you in a nutshell. I think it really is. And I do love that you are so passionate about mental health. Um, I have not struggled with that myself, at least not yet, thankfully, but I have very important people in my life, past and present, who struggle with it very heavily, and so it's a very important issue. And I'm glad you're out there speaking about it and loving people that deal with it. And so, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Um, and I think this book uh, really really showcases uh, a compassion for that with the characters that Ford interacts with. But I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself. I do want to let you kind of talk a little bit about the book. Tell us what it's about, elevator pitch, or longer than an elevator pitch if you'd like to.
Well, it's really fascinating to describe a story that you've written in it that is so passionate to you, because you want to just go on and on and on. But the very quick version is it's a semi-biographical, autobiographical adventure, set in fiction in the late 80s at the Fox Valley Mall in Aurora. And you have three people who are misfits, they're outcasts. You've got Ford, who is a traumatized former child model, and you have Cassie, who has a lot of traumas of her own, and a ex-partner that is stalkery and abusive, and a lot of past traumas, that is working at the she's working at the Orange Julius. And then you have Jenny, who is a young girl who is profoundly deaf, who is aspiring to become a model. And these three people meet in the Fox Valley Mall. They discover love, they discover friendship, and they have to face dangers and their own life obstacles at the same time. And really, the greatest takeaway is that we are stronger alone. Or we are stronger together than we are alone. We may not defeat all of the monsters in the way that we want to, but it doesn't matter as long as we're together and we get to be seen and heard and loved as we are.
Mhm. Oh, I love it. That is a great summary of the book, and I experienced that while reading the book. I experienced all those things, and um, it was funny. Some of the little things that really stuck out to me about your book, like the Orange Julius. Like I was a huge fan of Orange Julius back in the day, and uh, I think the nostalgia factor for this story is what really draws people in, and then you've got a captive audience for the bigger themes and topics that you're dealing with in the book. And I love that you use that nostalgia factor to draw people in because you've set it in a world that all of us Gen Xers are intimately familiar with, and I think that was perfect. Do you mind sharing kind of the journey that brought you to writing this book?
No, not at all. It all started. My main bread and butter, for lack of a better term, is GenXWatch. It's a online publication that features myself and occasionally. The original vision was to have a lot of other writers, and I was just going to be the editor in chief, but it didn't work out that way. But I have had some amazing guest columnists on. But I started doing this thing called Femme Fridays, and in Femme Fridays, I celebrated women from the '80s who made a difference that is still impacting us today. So, for instance, Cyndi Lauper would be one, Brooke Shields would be another. People that had an impact on their respected industries, advanced feminism, or were uh, allies for queer people or persons of difference or whatever the case may be. And then there was one time that I was mad at my audience. I had written an article about Tina Turner, and it was my first black woman that I'd written about. And it was always Femme Friday, Femme Friday, Femme Friday stats. I write about a black woman and nothing. And I started talking to some people about it, and some columnists of various higher end publications, and found out that this is par for the course. And I got really, really angry. And it's like, all right, apparently an independent black woman is a little bit too in your face. So I'm going to write about the most in your face person you I can think of. So I wrote this article about Joan Jett, but then I wanted to amp it up, and I'm like, and now I'm going to tell you about this girl named Sarah that I met at a Joan Jett concert in Ohio, and we did terrible, horrible things to each other for 5 days in her apartment and did a lot of drugs.
Yeah,
And so I wrote about that, and then something amazing happened. It wasn't about Joan Jett. Everybody loved Sarah,
yeah,
and they could relate to her. It was somebody who was just like they were when they were young, or if they are young, they related to her on that level. This was not a superstar changing the world. This was somebody living in her world, doing the best she could.
hmm,
And so I'm like, all right, let's experiment with this. So I started writing about other women that I knew in this amazing, beautiful time between 1988 and 1992, where I had almost left the toxic church background that I was a part of.
hmm,
And there was this crossroads. And unfortunately, I took the darker road and became a minister and got lost and then came out of that decades later. But part of my coming out of that world was the seeds that were planted by these amazing women that I knew, these amazing women that taught me so much. And it was lessons that were unfortunately slow for me to adopt. And so as I was starting to unpack these stories, I unpacked a very special person to me who we call in the book Cassie. And along with that, I unpacked my friendship of Jenny and just some other beautiful people. And that the reactions people had to those stories and the reactions I was having talking openly about a period of my life that I have forgotten about or tried to forget, which turned into some many fascinating therapy sessions. It was like, all right, I had a conversation with a publisher who was just like, you know what? Let's do this. Let's make this a book. And I'm like, no, let's make it a trilogy because it's too much. in those 3 years that happened. But obviously, we have to change the tone, we have to condense the timelines, and we have to change the people because you're basing it on real people, but you can't have it be a biography. You
Right.
want it to be something different. So we started the creation process. I mean, it took me 4 months to map out the entire universe because I did do world creating here. Though this is the 80s, I did do my own world creating, created what I called the Mallverse,
Mhm.
and I created these characters, and I had the whole outline for all three books done, and then I wrote book one, and that was from start to finish a 4 month process. It just happened, and draft after draft after draft, and it turned into something beautiful. And what was funny was, Ford is based off of me, but also incorporates elements of my child Harvey. Um, and Ford is not me. There are some things that Ford does that is better than who I am and better than who I was. And there are some areas where he's a little lost, but I'm very fond of him. And the same thing with Cassie and the same thing with Jenny. These are not replicants of the people that I knew, but they are very much inspired by them, and they develop. Anybody who writes fiction understands that they become a part of you. They're your friends, and sometimes they change the story outside of the outline because they're tugging at your heart and pushing it into a different way. So that was pretty much how the story came about. I started these columns, went to therapy, talked to a publisher, and here we are.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love hearing your journey, and I love hearing how you were inspired through sharing on Gen X to write the deeper story and to write the deeper context in a fictional universe. I love the Mallverse, by the way. I think that is the perfect moniker to describe this series. So I love that you titled it that. And I can definitely I personally, I think I told you this, I can personally relate to sorry, not Ford in so many ways. He encapsulates the kind of uh, late teen and young adult that I was in a lot of ways, in terms of how he related to other people and was very different than most macho guys around town and around the city, and macho guys that I went to high school with that probably beat their girlfriends and various things behind doors. And um, I just never really clicked with them, and I felt that I really kind of felt that emanating from Ford in a lot of ways. And I love how you talked about how Ford is you but not you, like
Mhm.
some of the things that you look back and you wish you could have done that Ford is doing. Maybe I don't know if that's the sense in which you're
Well,
meaning that, but
uh, I have two friends. One friend works for a major publisher, and his entire job is to vet book submissions that are brought into the publishing house to see if it's something that they want to do. And my other friend, I met her at a wedding many years ago, and she works for a studio, and she takes script submissions and determines if any of them are worth looking into. And one common mistake that both of them complain about is kind of what I call Beowulf syndrome. Beowulf has no real enemies that he can't conquer. Here's the problem. Here comes Beowulf. It's solved. And there's no real sense of suspense. So what they've done is they have created an idealized version of themselves that can resolve everything. And it's this hero that's beyond measure, that doesn't have any kryptonite, that doesn't have any weaknesses. And I think it was Oscar Wilde that talks about a compelling story is putting somebody up on a tree branch and seeing how much stuff you can throw at them before they fall off the branch. And
mm,
then they have to get up. And what happens next is what's interesting. So you can't create an idealized version of yourself. There has to be humanity, there has to be faults. And if you pay close attention, though Ford is not toxic, there are some toxic traits. There's a scene in a diner where he's talking to Jenny where he's trying to silence her from telling her story in front of Nora.
Hmm.
And there's another time with Cassie where he's keeps on trying to bring up things that she's made it clear she doesn't want to talk about.
Right.
So, he's not this perfect hero. He's somebody who's a little lost and trying to figure stuff out, but trying to do no harm.
Hmm.
And as a man in my 50s who self proclaims myself as a feminist, I'm very mindful of that.
Hmm.
Because, we've seen Neil Gaiman and we've seen Joss Whedon and we've seen others. I don't think they ever intended to be toxic. I think one of the things that happens is you get full of yourself when people start giving you accolades for being a good guy, that you don't have any guardrails and you don't have checks and balances. So it's one of those things where, I was very deliberate in having women vet the draft between drafts 2 and drafts 3. And I'm very intentional in working with a woman owned micro publisher to be able to make sure that there is oversight, to make sure that I don't do any harm. So I don't even remember the question, but I hope I answered it.
Yeah, no, you did, yeah. Because one of the things that I kind of wondered is if Ford had uh, kind of if Ford was the person that you kind of aspired to be, but in a sense, you pointed out that he still has a lot of toxic traits that are kind of that he's trying to work through and learn from, and he learns from the hard way, unfortunately, which is a lot of times how we do learn from those things.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, I remember those times with him and Cassie, and just thinking to myself, yeah, dude, let her be, let her be, give her space, and but yeah, I think we've all done that in a sense, and we see a lot of the people in the limelight, like you mentioned, like Gaiman and Whedon, where um, they get full of the spotlight and full of themselves, and it turns wrong. So
Hmm.
yeah, especially with Gaiman being having been a hero of mine, I was crushed by that. I'm like, wow. But I think spotlighting uh, victimization and believing people that are victims and hearing them and listening to them and just holding space for them is incredibly important. And I thought your book really did that in spades. I think it really did a good job of showcasing that, especially with Cassie, because uh, yeah, she had definitely been a victim of a lot of trauma, and I love the journey that she and Ford go on together through the book. And I thought that was really special.
Yeah, and I consider Cassie, and she's actually based off of two of the women in Femme Friday.
Okay.
Cassie and the two women that she's based off of all the Femme Fridays that I wrote, um, and looking at Cassie, she is possibly the strongest character in the story, in my opinion. She's the one that has the most inner strength, and she doesn't have the largest victories. But when you see her square off with him in one particular scene, when everybody's at the ER, not to give spoilers,
Hmm.
she checks him and you get to realize that she is very self-aware. She knows what she wants, she knows what she needs.
Hmm.
She just doesn't always, she has her own self-worth issues, and who wouldn't, considering her life. Now, Jenny is a fascinating case study, and she was wrote very deliberately this way. She is the most self-assured person, the least afraid of conflict, and the one who's okay calling you out, but will also forgive you once she realizes you get the point.
Yeah.
Jenny is written that way because I wanted, number one, the person she's based off of is very much that way. Number two, this is the profoundly deaf character, and there are so many bad tropes about people with disabilities disabilities where we have this empathetic person that needs a hero. She doesn't need a hero. What she needed was a friend or two.
Hmm.
And she's the strongest, most self-assured, most self-aware character in the book, and I absolutely love her, and I hope other people see her that way, because I think it is in our ableist society. We really engage into what's called disability porn,
Hmm.
where we look at people in these we say horrible, horrible things. You see a contestant on American Idol who's blind, and they're like, "Oh my God, how can he sing?" Well, he's not mute.
Right. Yeah.
Or we see somebody doing something. I have a friend. Her name is Elena. She's a quadriplegic from a very horrible accident, and she is an amazing graphic artist, an amazing human being. She's a leader of many community organizations, and yet people will look at her and say, "Oh my God, she's so brave. She made it to the store." And it's like you are totally missing out on the wonder of who this person is. This person also leads the Bolingbrook Art League and founded a pride organization and might be making a run for politics at some point. Don't know.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, in working with in writing Cassie, in writing Ford, in writing Jenny, I worked with experts in various fields. I worked with people in the deaf community. I worked with people in the trauma community and victim recovery community to get insights, because I'm a survivor of sexual assault and domestic violence. But that doesn't make me an expert. That makes me somebody who is in tune, understands, and is in therapy.
Hmm.
Um, but I needed to make sure that I wasn't doing any harm or creating bad tropes or bad archetypes or doing something that might somebody who is a survivor of these would be reading at 16, 17, 18 years old and feeling less. That's the opposite of what I would want to accomplish. I would never want somebody to read something I wrote and feel less unless maybe they're a toxic pastor. Um,
Yeah. And we see those in the book too. And
Absolutely. I
I
have fun with that.
I bet you did. I was very glad to see that, and I was very glad that you didn't pull any punches with that either, because it was very raw, and I think it was intended to be that way.
It was, and it was very difficult to write because you and I first met in a deconstruction circle, in a community of people that were walking away from their toxic phase. And I'm not insulting faith. People that have a sincere belief in God, they go to church, they're Christian, Jewish, they are beautiful, beautiful people. Um, but there is also toxicity. And we met in those circles, and we all speak a similar language.
Yes.
And we were all raised in that kind of world. So Ford is raised in this world, but you have to describe it in a way that, for lack of a better term, the layman understands.
Yeah.
And it can sound weird, and it's meant to sound weird to the normal reader. But striking that balance where somebody like you and I, who has grown up in that toxic environment, can look at and say, "Oh my God, I can relate." I mean, one of my test readers was a millennial woman who has been through some of this environment in some of this world, and I didn't know that. And she would give me notes every so often. She's like, "I don't trust so and so. I don't trust," and it's like, yeah, you went through it, you understand. But then there were other people who read it, and they were just like, "Oh God, that is." I wanted them to understand that world, but there has to be enough out of context that it seems foreign. So that way you can read it and envelop yourself in that, and other people can read it, understand it, but and see it for what it is.
Mhm.
Because it's so easy to vilify, but the nuances of that culture is so hard to explain. So it was a delicate balance, and you can't pull punches because He's a guy who is trying to find mentors. He's been through hell as a child, and he wants healing, and he wants belief, and he wants mentors, and he wants guidance, and he wants a better life, and he doesn't always realize that it's already there in front of him, but he's on this quest for something over here that's always right here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think you really nailed that with Ford, and I think you nailed the experience of someone growing up in that culture very well. And I felt as I was reading it, if I was coming to it as a non-churched person, that I would still be able to grasp what that experience was like.
And,
So
and that's why the test readers were so very important, was to make sure that I wasn't using insider language.
mhm,
I mean, just as a little running gag, I remember a stand-up comedian one time talking about Christianese back in the 80s, and he's like, "I don't feel lead," and it's like, well, here's a pencil. I feel a check in my spirit. Well, can you cash it? And I mean, there's this insular language that we used, and there's still an insular language that we use in the ex-evangelical community, in deconstruction community, that still is not plain English for
right.
people that are trying to understand that world from whence we came.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, you get a little bit of that alter lingo in the digital in the deconstruction community. So yes, I definitely see that. But I think you did a good job of relating that to the average person who may or may not be churched, may or may not have deconstructed. They just feel the raw emotion and experience that Ford is having and that Cassie is having. And um, I won't go into too much detail so I don't spoil for people, but that last scene crushed me in a good way. But that last scene, I felt that at the core of my soul. So thank
I
you.
understand.
Yeah.
And for whatever it's worth, that last scene, a different version of that did happen.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, I think if I remember right, I know I had seen it in a blog post of yours a long time ago, whether it was a Gen X blog post or if it was on Pathos. I can't remember where
No,
did
it was well, there was a shortened version in my Pathos article, God, 7, 8 years ago, but I revisited it as one of the Femme Fridays in a lot more detail.
yeah.
And yeah, that was, when you're 18, 19 years old and you're outgunned, and these people also have the knowledge of God on their side, and it's such a gaslighting trip. And I don't want people to think that this entire book is heavy, because we balance it out with a lot of beauty. It's just, you have to have conflict for a good story. I mean, an example that I once heard at Comic-Con: if you don't, the antagonist creates the plot,
Mhm.
because if you don't have Lex Luthor, Superman is just flying around all day being Superman. There has to be something that happens that lets you show what these people are made out of. And in the meantime, the nostalgia is fun, and it's written multi-generationally, because I do know that there's a large interest in the 80s and the 90s. Stranger Things popularity is just absolute proof of that. And
Yeah.
some of the content creators that are just reinvesting in music from our generation,
Mhm.
is just fun to watch. So, tapping into that, but also making it universal, and then having time for a love story, friendship story with a few moments of laughter, and the adorable, clueless nature of Ford many times, while everybody else can see things he can't,
Yeah.
is just so much fun to, you have to have that fun. You have to have that beauty, and you have to have that whimsy. And I really love the fact that some of the pre-reviews that are coming out, people are enjoying that. But
Mhm.
then there's also people that are seeing some of the things that you're seeing where it's just like these are important topics and both exist
Yeah.
in our lives simultaneously all the time. While you're in love, you may be dealing with a medical diagnosis.
Mhm.
While you are saving up for that beautiful vacation, you may also be going through some traumatic stuff. The beauty and the horror happen all the time.
They do. Yeah, they really do. And I think you really captured that in a very real way in the book. And it's funny you mentioned Stranger Things because I was thinking after I read this book that it did the same thing for me that Stranger Things did for me in terms of that nostalgia and drawing me into that world, albeit in a different way because that's a very supernatural story and this is a very down to earth real life story. But the nostalgia factor of the 80s and early 90s really, it hits that same nerve in a sense. And
I appreciate that. And the Duffer Brothers did something absolutely brilliant that really was one of the inspirations for me to start Gen X Watch. There is a scene in season one of Stranger Things where the Byers brothers, there's a flashback scene uh, where they're enjoying should I stay or should I go together. And while that's happening, mom and dad are having a horrible argument in the background.
mhm,
And the older brother is telling the younger brother, hey, The Clash, Joy Division, all of these other bands, they're going to save your life.
yep,
And that song takes a very strong role in especially season one of being a tool for Jonathan and the younger brother to be able to communicate, and to reach out despite being in the upside down,
mhm,
and that really got me because when I was a teenager living with my grandparents, having escaped a domestic violence and SA situation, um, I was listening to songs on my Walkman to drown out the internal noise. And I was bullied a lot at school. And I would go home and listen to my tunes or read certain books like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
yeah,
And you would find these beautiful stories. They were the things that the beauty that we discover in nostalgia sometimes. There was something else going on in the background.
yeah,
And when we shame Gen Z kids, oh, the kid's always got his earbuds on and he's listening to his TikToks and this and that. Screw that.
yeah,
What you need to ask yourself is there something that that kid is drowning out while they're discovering their beauty?
mhm,
And you better hope to hell it's not you that they're trying to drown out.
right,
And maybe discover some of that sublime beauty because we want to expose the kids to our music, but God, they are listening to some pretty amazing stuff. I have an album in my record collection that my child exposed me to called The Destroy Boys, and
yeah,
it is great, fun, ironic punk, and it's so much fun. There is so much beautiful stuff being created that the younger generation is adopting to, and I have no problem admitting that I'm a Swiftie. I love that music, but I also need my Joy Division and I need my Cyndi Lauper. And, I will post selfies of myself anytime I get a new album. I just recently got Avalon and I'm just like, oh my God, Avalon, original 1982 cut, Czech Republic. Yeah. Um, but um, I discovered Roxy music when I was going through hell. And healthy nostalgia is knowing that that beauty is connected to other things.
yeah,
Unhealthy nostalgia is when we think we are freaking awesome because we drank from water hoses and stayed out till dawn, till
right,
dusk. That we weren't stars freaking awesome. Our generation was not amazing or superior to any other generation.
right,
That is a lie we tell ourselves because we're not understanding what our nostalgia is. Um, Times were simpler? No, we were younger. We just had less complexities, but we also had complexities
Sure.
that we have suppressed so much. One of the things that I really love about Gen Z is how open they are in those discussions, because what you see with Cassie Ford and Jenny is they're touching on some of these discussions and they're trying to navigate it, but it was unusual moments for us to have those conversations. It's why in the Breakfast Club, the library confession scene is so poignant, because that was a rare moment that maybe you had or somebody else our age had, where they
Right.
were sitting in a basement with a friend and they really broke through that ice and talked about the real things that were going on. And that's important. And that's where the beauty of nostalgia lies. The horror of nostalgia is using it to obfuscate what happened and shame younger generations. Don't be a gatekeeper, be somebody that enables.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. And yeah, every generation has their safety net. And it just so happens that, this generation, they've got newer music that I can still totally appreciate, and they've got their TikToks and their things like that. And that may be their safety net, like you mentioned. I've I've been turned on to some great music from my kids. Things like Caravan Palace and Mother Mother and um, uh, Group Love, and like so those are some of my youngest favorites. And they're more into music than my oldest is, but my oldest still likes some music and has got some really good picks. But he's also introduced me to some older stuff that I've never heard, some older jazz and some. So he's kind of all over the board with that, and
Nice.
I've learned so much from my kids music wise. So um, and I love that this book is so heavily focused on on the power that the music that they were listening to had to give them peace and give them a shelter from the storm in a way. If things are going wrong at home, I can pop a Joy Division cassette into my Walkman and just walk away and feel like I'm in a different world, and or feel like I'm on the stage or in the crowd at one of their concerts. And I think that's really important. And just a side note on that, or a side question rather, I don't know if you've thought about this, or if you have this in the works, but have you thought about having a soundtrack to go along with the book as a promotional thing? Or
Well, obviously, there's copyright issues with that
yeah,
I
right.
absolutely want to respect,
Yeah.
but there is something that I'm going to be starting on next week. I'm going to be creating sort of using my little studio back here,
Uh-huh.
creating a playlist with me sort of being an MTV VJ, introducing each song,
Love
because
it.
we have 31 songs in here.
Yeah.
Um, I don't, I mean, I thought about doing a Spotify playlist, but I don't want to be part of something that rips off artists.
Of course.
At least if I'm pulling it from their official Vivo, they're connected to it. So
Mhm.
I don't know if they're getting a fair share of the royalties, but it's at least better than Spotify.
Sure.
And plus, since, I was from the 80s, MTV and watching the music video, I have 31 songs that I mentioned. Some feel incidental, others have foreshadowing. There's a couple scenes in the record store where you hear them talk about various artists, and you're going to find out how those play into the inspiration of these characters. Like Cassie is unabashedly a Blondie fan, but that's because of Deborah Harry. Deborah Harry inspires her. Deborah Harry's ability to pull together fashion, Deborah Harry's fierce feminism, and a lot of the things that she has done in this world socially give her hope. Because we didn't have the internet back then, but we had, if you were hanging out in a record store, we had Cream magazine, we had Rolling Stone, when it had serious journalism before it was bought by the Penske organization.
Right.
We had all of these amazing, beautiful things to learn about our favorite artists. And there were interviews, and MTV had this amazing thing for alternative music and punk scene called 120 Minutes, where you could just be a sponge for information if somebody inspired you. I mean, in the 80s, because of queer coding, pardon me, in the 80s, Cyndi Lauper, when she sang songs like Boy Blue and True Colors, the LGBTQIA plus community knew that she was singing to them.
Yeah.
And that was important because we didn't live in an era where you could speak openly. And we've come so far, and hopefully we're able to preserve that and continue to advance, which is why we do have a character that is a gay man. And he's a very small character, but I felt it was very important to include him
Hmm.
because I wanted that friendship to be normalized.
Hmm.
And to also have some banter between Ford and him about Ford's involvement in church culture.
Hmm.
You know, and uh, that's important because we had this coding, but Cassie was inspired. She has a strong inspiration with Deborah Harry, and she has it with X-ray specs, and she has it. I mean, there are these stories about these strong women who she aspires to be. That especially whenever we get into the X-ray specs, that's her inner cry. That's what she wants to scream to the world. And that's an important message that music gives us, poetry gives us.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And I loved how deep her connection was to Blondie with that and to Deborah Harry. I love that you had the small character part for the guy in the department store too, who's gay, because I think that really I think that's really important, like you said, to normalize that that's not a new thing. uh, LGBTQIA people have always been around, and they've been an important part of our culture and been an important part of our friendships. Uh,
And a person very much like him was a coworker of mine in a job that I had. And it was for me not so much Ford. Ford, like I said, is different than I am. Ford is just like, oh, he's gay. Doesn't matter.
right.
But for me, the person that I worked with, it was an inner conflict for me back then because of that toxic church culture I was raised in.
Mhm.
I liked him. I
Mhm.
enjoyed talking to him. And
Mhm.
it was this beginning struggle of going to, hanging out with him at work on Monday and going to youth group on Tuesday and hearing that he's somehow bad and separated from God and part of this evil agenda that is out to destroy society. And it was just like, that doesn't, no, he's really a cool guy. And I like talking to him. And he's never hurt anyone, but you, Mr. Pastor, are hurting people.
Yeah.
And that was so hard for me to reconcile. So writing Lance in, I was very concerned about, I didn't want him to be a token, but
Mhm.
I wanted him to be part of the background characters. And just be there and not make a big deal out of it. But he's there. There's a lot of people that are there, and we don't make a big deal out of it because I want that to just be part of the background. It's the same thing with the 80s nostalgia. I love alternative history fiction,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to name names because I don't want to dismiss anybody. And some of these people are New York Times bestsellers. So they obviously are doing something I'm not. But there are some stories where the historical fiction, it's the background. Gone with the Wind, Titanic, it's not about the Civil War. It's not about the Titanic sinking, but it's
Right.
about the characters that are experiencing this thing in this time. So you want to have a good background, a good world built for your story, but sometimes the emphasis can be so much onto the nostalgia where I could have had incessant conversations about Pac-Man, Galaga, and the Rubik's Cube, and it would have distracted from the story.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the characters that are experiencing different things. It just is, and they just are. And we're going to touch on it, but we're going to do so in such a way that we don't tokenize him because there's a conversation between Jenny and Ford. And there's some teasing from Lance towards Ford.
Right.
And I think those are important moments that are subtle.
Yeah.
And inclusion should just be normalized. It shouldn't be a big deal. I have a hard time dealing with allies that every June make it about them. This isn't your story, dude. This is their story. We're allies. Putting out memes that says, "Oh, I may lose friends over this, but I'm an ally." It just seems so self-serving. If you lose friends over it, continue to be an ally, but
Yeah.
don't brag about it. Don't wear it as a badge of honor. I honestly don't use the term for myself as a self-descriptor. If somebody else calls me one and
Mhm.
they are of the community that I'm trying to be a friend to, then I have been knighted by royalty.
Yeah, absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree.
So yeah, it was fun to include him. You're going to see more of that character in book
Good.
two, and you're also going to see stronger LGBTQ representation in book two. But again, that was me not wanting to, you can throw in inclusivity and all of these things to make a social statement,
Mhm.
or you can make it part of the story, and that is a social statement. And I don't want to force anything because, my child is LGBTQ, and the letter is not the world's concern. But in our life together, we have read a lot of bad YA fiction written by people that are not of that community, that have done absolutely zero research,
Yeah.
and it's laughable and insulting. And whenever they get called out for that,
Hmm.
they get defensive and say, "Oh, well," and they still want a merit badge because they tried. No, you didn't try. You
Yeah.
you did zero research. If I may, Jenny was heavily researched.
Hmm.
Um, I had for a time in my life a younger sister that was deaf, and that was where I initially learned ASL.
Okay.
And then Jenny came into my life. The person Jenny is based off of came into my life when I was 18. And I found out how rusty I was and had to pick it up again. So I have experience, but I'm still not deaf.
Yeah.
So I found I was able to have a brief conversation with a romance writer who is in the deaf community, and she gave a lot of feedback and quality information about how to write ASL
Mm.
as dialogue. Because it's not English, it's not a word for word translation. It's not something that just uses your hands. It uses your whole body. It uses your face. It's a different language.
Hmm.
And then she also spoke about tropes to avoid that are commonly used in literature that portrays people in the deaf community. And so I was very cognizant of that. And then between draft two and three, when I had my test readers, um, some of them were women in the deaf community because I needed to be sure that I was not leaning into any tropes and that this was a character that they would enjoy.
Hmm.
And I know that there's definitely the possibility that somebody may read it and they may be hurt. They
Hmm.
might be offended. I hope that's not the case, but if they are, I'm going to listen. I'm not going to sit there and say, "Well, I tried really hard." No, you listen.
Hmm.
You have to. You have to hear what the people who are affected by something are.
Hmm.
And I do admit that I also have this secret dream. I would love to have a young woman from the deaf community or any other disability community say, "You know what? I could write a stronger character, da 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 blah," and send me that letter, and I would say, "Let's introduce you to my publisher. Let's make that happen."
Yeah, absolutely.
Because when I was writing for Pathos, I was writing as well. Screw it. I was writing as a parent of a transgender child.
Hmm.
And um, I knew that Pathos gave me that platform because I was a white cis male.
Hmm.
Um, but they didn't give that platform to a trans person who was living that experience. And it was a responsibility that I did not take lightly. And there were times where I offended people in the trans community. And whenever that happened, I shut up and I listened because I'm a dad, I'm a friend, but I don't live that experience. And you have to be very mindful of that. You have to be very careful of that. But I was left with two choices. Do I write this person as that I'm basing the character on as she was? Or do I take the easy path and write her as a Hiri?
Hmm. Right.
I I opted for the road of writing her and to make sure that I didn't overstep my bounds too badly. This is third person intimate perspective through Ford's eyes.
Hmm.
And Ford's eyes are imperfect,
Hmm. Right.
just as my eyes are imperfect. And the women around her that become her friends throughout the course of the story, their understanding is imperfect. The only person that truly understands Jenny is Jenny. And Jenny has no problem making herself be listened to
Yeah.
be paid attention to. And I love her for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I do too. I thought Jenny was an amazing character, and I'm so glad that you didn't go. I'm so glad that you didn't go the Harry route. I'm glad you made the extra effort and went the slightly more difficult route to write her as she was. And I think it might have shown through if you had done the opposite. So I think it was really good.
Well, if I'd have done the opposite, she just would have been a pretty preppy redhead
Yeah, right.
who's very strong-willed, and um, that's who Jenny is. But Jenny also has this other dynamic that is holding her back, and it's not her issue;
Hmm.
it's society's issue. I mean, these events take place in 1988. That's 2, 3 years before ADA was even a law
Right.
that offered protections. And even though those protections are offered, we still have issues.
Yeah.
We still have we still live in an ableist culture. We still live in a place where ASL, Braille, ramps, somehow we make it sound like these are a big deal. There was recently in the news a story about a 6-year-old boy who has a diabetic service animal
Hmm.
that was not allowed entrance at a roller rink in Ohio because of the dog.
Mm.
And it turned into a huge, huge internet hullabaloo, and it hit the news and it went national. And so it's still going on today. People don't take the time to understand this is not a comfort animal. This is a service animal that has a role. And currently, the law protects the right for that mom and that 6-year-old to enter with that service animal that does an amazing service and can tell if the kid's blood sugar levels are in danger.
Yes. Mm.
You need that, and that needs to be respected. Ramps need to be there. I mean, this is common sense,
Mhm.
but we make it so difficult. At the event that you're talking about, there is going to be an ASL translator there,
I know.
and
I remember you talking
that's
about that.
that's costing money.
Mhm.
I don't want to say how much money, but that's a service that costs money. And that's why we had an Indiegogo to raise funds for that. Didn't raise near as many funds as I had hoped to. So those ASL interpretation services are coming out of my cut. That's coming out of my credit card swipe. But it matters. And it was funny because the organization is like, um, well, how many people do you anticipate being there? And I'm like, I don't know. There might be zero, there might be 10. I honestly don't know. But that's not the point. It should be there for anybody who needs the service.
Yes.
Um, in the same way that the outside of the facility that I'm speaking at has accessible entranceways and
Mhm.
has accessible paths to get to the second floor of the library. Um, in the same manner, if we're going to have a character, it, it, members of the deaf community were so kind to give me insights into how to make Jenny a compelling person, how to make Jenny a great character that enhances the story. And
Mhm.
between draft 2 and 3, trust me, I didn't hit it out of the park. There was some feedback that I had to adjust, show it to them, and have them say, "You got it."
Mhm.
Um, but how could I take that feedback and not give every opportunity for somebody to be an equal part of this with it would just be thankless and it would be a grand adventure in missing the point. Persons with disabilities have to adjust to our world, and we make it sound like a Herculean BS effort when we have to accommodate them. And in any friendship that you have, tell me where that makes sense, where you make your friend accommodate you, your needs, your interests, your wants, your everything, and you don't do jack for them. And whenever they ask you for something that's reasonable, you're just like, oh, that's going to cost me money and time, and I have to listen to you instead of talk. That's messed up. That's
Yeah,
not being a friend. That's
that's
not
right.
being a neighbor.
Yeah, I agree.
So I'm not doing it to be a big ass hero. I'm doing it because it's just what we should do.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I'm really glad to hear. I'm sorry to hear in a way that the Indiegogo didn't raise enough funds to really make that happen, but you made it happen anyway. And
Yes.
and you're bringing the ASL interpreters in, and I think that's going to be huge because I think we assume, oh, people like that just aren't going to come out to these events. No, they are. If someone is there that can interpret for them.
And if nobody shows, that's not the point. I mean,
Yeah,
a
exactly.
stupid analogy is imagine if you're building a public space like a
Mhm.
library or a government building. And are you really going to have a conversation about ramps and accessibility and say, well, how many people are really going to show? What if nobody comes?
Yeah, yeah. It's
Uh,
just common sense
right.
to make as many accommodations as possible. And then if they show, they show. If not, they don't. And yeah, I like that. I like that approach. And I know you kind of already answered the question a little bit about, because I was going to ask about the research part of it that went into the book. And so I was going to ask about that. So you elaborated that on that a little bit, especially with Jenny. I'd love to hear what some of the other research was, especially because this is a YA novel. You didn't write it for adults who are going to probably relate the most to the 80s necessarily, but you wrote it for the young adults that are growing up now, so they have something to relate to. So did you do some research into the audience uh, that you're writing for as well?
Absolutely. I didn't do research into generational studies.
Okay.
What I did do research on is I worked with a couple experts in, I worked with two experts in the psychology community about about being a survivor of domestic violence and sexual assault, and wanted to get their insights as to what trauma reactions look like, what are common misperceptions that people have, so that that could become part of the story too.
Mhm.
Because there's one particular scene where You see that Ford and two other characters, Doug and Linda, don't completely understand some of the things that happened, and there's guilt and blame and blah, 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 blah. But that's authentic and common to the experiences of victims who may not be believed or may not be understood. And then I also wanted to make sure that they vetted the certain chapters to make sure that you know we're discussing these issues. They have happened to these people, but how do we do it in such a way that they understand it, they feel it, but more than anything else, they feel hope and empowerment,
Mhm.
and reinforcement that this wasn't a you problem. Somebody did this to you. How do we not reinforce that victim nature, but still tell a great story that especially victims can embrace and see something beautiful in? So I consulted with two people in the front lines of SA and DV. The other thing that I worked with was somebody who works in a different field that's related, and that was a trauma nurse.
Mhm.
I wanted to talk to somebody who is, what has happened when you've been working the ER in third shift and you've had somebody that's come in with these things. You've seen it, you've dealt with it, and then you are that first step of trying to find out what happened and getting those resources. And I found out how amazingly nurses are trained, but I also got information to make sure that the medical details were correct and the reactions to certain things are correct. Um, and that was important. So, yeah, I consulted with a lot of amazing people who gave me the time. And, that harkens back to me and Harvey reading books written about people similar to my child, where the person did absolutely no research. Or I've read books where, there was a YA novel where a character was a victim of gang rape, sexual assault by multiple people. And she kind of went more into that Jodie Foster movie, whose title I can't remember at the moment, where it was so graphic and in your face that a lot of people who had survived such things had trouble reading it. She was going for realism, but didn't do the research into what the potential impact had, and it affected adoption of her story. It affected critical reviews of her story, and I don't know the woman personally, but there's no way she intended any harm.
Yeah.
There's no way she meant to be callous. Sometimes the road to hell can be paved with good intentions.
Mhm.
We have careless advocacy, but then we have people that make innocent mistakes.
Mhm.
And in my life as a human being, um, the people that I have hurt with no intention of hurting, those are the ones that were the hardest for me to forgive myself over. The mistakes made in wanting to help, I have to live with those things. I have to forgive myself. They don't have to forgive me.
Yeah, right.
And to realize, especially when I was a youth pastor, that I might be part of somebody else's trauma road,
Mhm.
that's a hard thing to live with.
It is.
And you never intended to do any harm. And I feel for that YA author of a different decade. Um, I wanted to make sure I didn't do that,
Mhm.
especially considering that we are going to get these books into the hands of people that live in shelters,
Mhm.
DV and SA shelters. Um, I wanted to make sure that when they read this, that there's more hope, there's more inspiration, and there's something beautiful. Um, but it happens. It happens every day, and we need to have those conversations. But we can do those conversations without being salacious or causing more harm.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And I can really relate with you in terms of looking back and seeing how I could have played part of the problem when I was in that role, and learning to forgive myself too. I can relate with you very very deeply on that fact. So uh, and learning to
Yeah.
not be part of the problem anymore. It's a long road.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. So I really appreciate that. I do want to talk to you a little bit about the process of getting published and everything. But real quick, I want to make kind of a commercial here for everybody, just to let you know if you're interested in looking more into the background of where Hearts of Glass came from. I am going to be leaving links to Pat's blog at GenXWatch.com. I'm going to leave all the links for Pat down in the description below. I'll leave a link to the Indiegogo as well. Is it still going on, even
The
after the?
Indiegogo is going on. It's got a handful of days left,
Mhm.
and there is an option to renew, but I'm not going to do that.
Okay.
I'm the people that have ordered the perks, I'm going to get them their books, I'm going to get them their perks. I'm going to mail those off and be very happy with that. At a later date, I am going to do a pure I'm going to be doing a simple GoFundMe where there are no perks, there are no free copies. I'm just hoping on the goodwill of people to be able to fund money that is just because the Indiegogo was pretty much for everything.
Mhm.
For the GoFundMe, I want that to be just for ASL interpreters
Mhm.
and just for free copies of books to people who have a need, who are survivors of DV and SA, or maybe encountering some other financial circumstance where they're not able to afford books. And that's not only going to be for my books, but everything within the publisher. So that said, the Indiegogo is still alive. What is it that you wanted to know about the process of being published?
Yeah, I would very much like to know what your experience was, what led you to pursue the publisher that you went with. If this was if you had a journey of, do I self-publish? Do I go with a traditional publisher? Do I go with an indie publisher? Like the hybrid model kind of thing. What did that look like for you? And what were the successes and the pitfalls of going through that process for you personally?
Okay. Well, I'm going to preface it by saying that I don't think that there is any right or wrong way to go about publishing a story.
Mhm.
Um, when I did my book 11 years ago, Night Moves, An Ex-Preacher's Journey to Hell in a Taxi,
Mhm.
that book was through a more traditional publisher. So I had an editor that was assigned to me and paid for by them. I had their assistance in publicity and so on and so forth. I didn't realize how good I had it. And it was wonderful to do that. In during the pandemic, I published a 70-page novella that I don't really talk about very often because it did abysmally. But honestly, sales wasn't the point. I needed to do something while all hell was breaking loose and the world was uncertain. And I was trapped in my house during shelter in place. But that was a self-published effort, and it did miserably. Um, when I realized that I not only was going to be writing a book, but three books, which is now four, and I'll get to that later.
Okay.
Um, I looked at the different models that are out there,
Mhm.
and so much of this industry is now predatory because I know what a good contract looks like. I mean, when I was a minister, I used to work closely with an organization that helped people get published in Christian writing. So, I mean, I knew Pete Rollins and several other, Jay Baker and several other people. along their way to get their publishing deals and getting them early speaking gigs over in the Chicagoland area when I was with the Emergent Village, an organization that was kind of this theological think tank, long story. But when I was involved in that, I got to see what a good contract looks like, what a bad contract looks like. I was a child model, and to this day, I still work with aspiring models. This industry has so many self-publishing models that you look at, and it is so freaking predatory, but you also need something or someone. Otherwise, you're going to only have some friends and family that enjoy the story. So, Ton Krakowski, who runs Barnstormer Publishing and Tonlandia, she came from a very small publisher whose name I can't remember, but this small publisher that actually did some amazing big things. It was a micro publishing model, which looks like many different things in micro publishing. But in this, it was a sort of a collaboration of other authors working together for mutual interest.
Mhm.
And that publishing house, unfortunately, as these things do, went away. So her and another woman from those days were trying to bring it back. And I'm the debut book for this, but I'm not the debut book because they're also bringing in stuff that they had written back in the day, which they still have the copyright for. And they're bringing forward those books back to life while creating new books. Ton has some amazing books, Darkling Drake, the Pirate Princess series, which is written for younger girls, and they're amazing, fun stories, fantasy stories, adventure stories, really good, solid stuff. But we had several conversations because she loves Femme Friday, and in Tonlandia, where she does audio recordings, um, we she has recorded through her interpretations some of the Femme Friday episodes about the real women, not the celebrities, and they're absolutely beautiful. Um, and but in those conversations, we were just like, all right, we have no money, we have no marketing budget, we have no plan. Let's effing do this.
Mhm.
But what is she has a lot more books published under her belt. She and her friends do too, and they have connections. They know the industry and they know the landmines. And along the way, though we haven't launched it and I can't really talk about it too much, but we have found what we feel is a non predatory way to find new talent, give them the opportunity to get published, and do so in a way where they're going to get 40-50% of the cut
Wow, that's great. Yeah.
because they need to have that opportunity, and you can't do this predatory. The other thing, I'm going to mispronounce it, but Nama Wapro or whatever you do every November.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, NaNoWriMo. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That is a multi-million dollar industry that is pushing people to believe that they have to do 10,000, 20,000 words in a month. And
Mhm.
that's the way you're going to do it. And they give you all these models. Not everybody is designed the same way. You read Stephen King's On Writing, he can hammer out a book from idea to final draft completion in 3 months, and you know how long his books are.
Yeah.
That's who he is. I can write a book in about the same amount of time. Not as many pages as his, but this book is around 240, 270 pages, something like that.
Mhm.
Um, but that's him. That's me. Somebody else, it might take them 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah,
And you can't say this is better, this is worse.
exactly.
It's like in the industry, you're either a pantser or a plotter.
Mhm.
Um, eh, there's no right or wrong way.
Yeah.
You have to have your style, your personality, your vision, And this industry has forgotten who it is, and yet we have people hungering for good stories.
Mhm.
And I am so grateful in this exploration. I'm never going to be buying another book from big box or billionaires ever again, because I have been into these indie bookstores to ask for permission to have the honor to present there. And even the ones that said no, their stores are beautiful. You hang out there for an hour
Mhm.
and get to see the interactions they're having. This is a part of the community. These are people that love stories. And I didn't write about it in the book, but I remember being a kid going into Walden Books, going into a little bookstore called the Book Nook,
Mhm.
and going into these and having these conversations with other book lovers and having that time without some corporate thug looking at the employees saying, hey, you're not on break here. You got
Right.
to work. No, this is part of the engagement. We love literature. We love stories. We love being a community hub. We love helping people. There was one bookstore that I was in where woman was doing something that had to do with Taming of the Shrew. And the owner of the bookstore was spending a lot of time with her talking about which edition do you want? What are the differences? Do you need any other study aids? I mean, he was just spending his time making sure that she walked away with the Taming of the Shrew that would best suit her needs, her purposes, and have extra material for her to really be able to do what she needed to accomplish with that story. That's amazing.
Mhm.
You can't get that from a website.
Yeah.
You can't point and click and add that to cart. That's an engagement. That's part of the community. And if I'm a small independent author working with a micro publisher, they're small independent bookstores doing life on their own in a world that by the end of this year, 80% of the book market share is going to be owned by Bezos.
Yeah.
And um, these spaces are important to communities. They're important to children. They're important to senior citizens. They're important to anybody who loves books and loves stories. And stories, they inspire us, they educate us, they're a beautiful escape. They're just as important as hearing that song on your Walkman or your iPod or your earbuds on your iPhone.
Mhm.
This is an important part of your journey to discover beauty and develop your new healthy nostalgia.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I really love the I love frequenting my indie bookstores here in the valley, and I definitely think that is going to be the post Bezos era if we can get it there, if we can get them the support they need. I think that's going to be huge in crafting a culture that loves stories but doesn't have to go to one source.
The third stop in my mini book tour for the launch is going to be a bookstore in Darien, Illinois
Oh yeah.
called Frugal Muse. They sell new books, used books, CDs, DVDs.
Uh-huh.
Paul and his wife have been around for decades in that community. They've got a lot of square footage, but I have lived where I live now for 11 years,
Mhm.
and I have countless books from them, but I can tell you for a fact, all 11 of my Gonzo books came from there. And whenever I refer to Gonzo, I'm referring to Hunter S. Thompson,
Okay.
who is one of my journalism heroes. Hunter S. Thompson, Mike Royko from the Chicago Tribune, who wrote a book called Boss about the original Mayor Daley that really upset Mayor Daley and the mafia. I love these badasses with the pen and paper in the 60s, 70s, 80s
Yeah.
that were just killing it and shaking things up. Every one of my Hunter S. Thompson books has come from Frugal Muse. Some have been new, some have been used. But I mean, that store doing a presentation there on Saturday, April 19th. is just like the library. It's kind of a homecoming because I get to present in my bookstore,
Hmm.
the bookstore I go to, the
Yeah,
bookstore I've gone to for 11 years, and they're letting me do this. How beautiful is that?
yeah, yeah.
I
That's
mean, this is a guy who hosts some big players in the industry, and he's letting me present in the same store that legends and New York Times bestsellers have. That's like being invited to the Grand Ole Opry.
yeah, it is. That's huge. That's really exciting that you get to do that. And I think that's something that you wouldn't get uh with a major storefront. You might be able to squeeze a deal like that with B&N, but you'll never get that with Amazon. So and you 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 reach a whole different audience that way sometimes, and I love it. We've got three here in the Phoenix area. We've got Changing Hands, we've got Bookman's, and then we've got a new one, fairly new. It's called Book Off, and both Book Off and Bookman's sell CDs, DVDs, books, just like Frugal Muse. Changing Hands does a little bit, but they mostly cater to books only, and that's great too. But they're wonderful spaces to hang out in, to connect, to talk with other readers. I remember being at Changing Hands um, probably a year ago now. I was there with some friends, and this friend happens to be a booktuber as well. And somebody in the bookstore recognized her from BookTube, and now they're great friends as well. It's just
That's awesome.
yeah. So that the community aspect I think is huge. And
Since I'm giving shout outs, there's another one that I've never been to it, but I'm going to it for the first time for my second presentation. And that's going to be Thursday, April 17th in Peoria, Illinois. Now, I'm in the Chicagoland area, which is northern Illinois. This is central Illinois. Um, but I found her online, her social media presence, her engagement with her readers or her customers, and the things that they do, the things that they say. You can just tell that there's a community vibe. And it's called the Peoria Book Rack in Peoria, Illinois. And there's a phrase because, I was raised like Ford by my grandparents more than I was my mom and my dad.
mhm,
So I wasn't raised by boomers. I was raised by the silent generation.
mhm,
So in my pop culture, I also have exposure to music from the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and movies and stuff like that. But one of the things that I learned is that in vaudeville, there used to be this phrase that said, if it plays in Peoria. Peoria, Illinois used to be this iconic testing ground for your vaudeville act, for your play, for whatever it was that you were trying to promote, because it was this crossroads of America and still is. In 1982, I saw Tron there. Also in the 80s, I saw Toto in Peoria. I mean, it's a part of my Gen X experience going to Peoria.
yeah,
State fairs and stuff like that would be it there because it's more rural. Yeah, but you've also got Caterpillar and Morton Salt Company in nearby Morton, Illinois. I mean, you've got all of these wonderful things there. So for me, this is tapping into that superstition of I get to sit there and find out if my book will play in Peoria.
uh-huh,
And I'm doing it with this amazing woman veteran owned business. And she's the same age I am. And the bookstore was actually founded in 70. If I remember reading up on her correctly, she bought the bookstore when she found out that they were selling or going out of business or something of that nature because she's like, I can't let this go down. I love this bookstore. I'm just going to buy it.
uh-huh,
And that's an amazing story. But one of the things they invite people from the community to collaborate. They have this new T-shirt with Smokey the Bear that says "Only you can prevent book burnings,"
ah,
um,
that's
that
great.
they've just
I
released,
saw that
and
picture online. Yeah.
yeah, and I hope those T-shirts go freaking viral. She also, anytime somebody has a birthday in the neighborhood, they get to go in and get a free book. And she takes a picture of them, young or old, holding up the book that they're taking home for their birthday book. And that is amazing. I love everything about her energy.
Mhm.
And this is a place that I've never been to, but I feel like I'll be coming home in a strange way, especially with the interactions that I've had with her. And again, just like Frugal Muse, this is somebody that's had much bigger players than I am in YA, fantasy, mystery, horror. I'm honored to be allowed to have the privilege of being in her bookstore and hawk my books and tell my story.
Mhm.
That wow. Um,
That's fantastic. What an awesome opportunity. And I hope it just uh I hope it just blows up in a good way for you. I really hope it takes off. And yeah, if anything, it's those independents that I think are really going to reach the audience you want.
we have three opportunities in the trilogy to be able to capture a fan base, an authentic fan base that relates to these characters. So it's not a one off. I mean, no matter what happens with this book, we keep moving forward with book two and book three. And whenever I mention book four, one of the things that we're going to be doing is in either Tonlandia or Barnstormer, I'm going to be writing short stories in an expanded universe between book ones and book two, and between book two and book three, where you're going to get to learn more about some of the background characters and people that you've never met. So we're going to expand that universe and tell more of those little stories and create opportunities for anybody that may be a fan to have a character based on them
That's
in the story too. But then I'm going to keep some reserved by myself because when we release book three, there's going to be a bound edition of the most popular short stories, along with some that were never shown online before.
okay.
So give people that expanded universe because um, as I wrote Femme Friday, there were a lot of people that I wrote about.
Mhm.
There's a lot of beautiful stories, and there are things that I couldn't include to the timeline that I would like to include through other people. So, since you've read the book, you know that Doug is the assistant manager of a record store. You're Doug's going to have some fun short stories.
That
You're going to learn a little bit more about his past history with a character named Jeff,
mhm.
and why he's sort of a check on Jeff's world. You're going to, so we're going to explore some of those things and have fun with more of those stories. One that I really hope people enjoy is the real person that the Nora character is based off of. And me, we had a fun side hustle. We used to go to frat parties and take keychain photos at their parties. So
That's
I
all.
would take the photos and then develop them in a bathroom on slide photos, put them in these little keychain photos, and she would sell them. And we were making extra money, but we had one gig that we went to where things went horribly wrong. And real life person that Nora is based off of had to use a baseball bat to get us out of the situation.
Oh wow.
So, I want to write some of those stories too that are fun, poignant, and contain adventures.
Mhm.
Because one thing that is a truism about Gen Xers is we were a feral generation. We were left unattended and left to our own devices, and we grew up fast.
Yeah.
A lot of the themes, and it's one of the reasons why I sort of did a Yoda and unlearned everything that I knew about YA fiction to be able to write these characters
Mhm.
in a more mature fashion. And also, along with that, I think that's important because um, a lot of the young people today are dismissed for their experiences simply because of their youth. But they have the nuances, they have the emotional intelligence, they have the depth, sometimes more so than their parents and their grandparents. It goes back to that David Bowie quote about They understand their circumstances. And it's important. Mr. Rogers used to speak to the adults often about saying it's about getting on their level. Now, we're talking about young children. But if Mr. Rogers, a man with many a degree, can sit there and realize it's important to talk to children at their level, then my God, talking to a teen or a youth or a young adult, you don't pander to them. You don't treat them like they're less.
Right.
You create nuanced adult characters because when you experience trauma, when you go through some things, you grow up fast. And in some ways, you're robbed of your childhood.
Yeah.
And yet, you still find time, hopefully, to make friends and to not be alone.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, that's great. That's exciting to hear about the short stories and the eventual collection of those. I guess is that the book four that you briefly mentioned
Yes,
earlier?
yes, that's book four.
Okay, that's exciting. That's very exciting. And I wanted to also shout out your cover artist, who is also an occasional author on the Gen X blog. Uh, but Jeremy Rich, correct?
Jeremy Rich is one of the most amazing people, and I'm going to use this to dovetail into a point that I want to get into before we sign off.
Oh, absolutely.
Um, Jeremy Rich, I have known Jeremy since 2006. We met through Jay Baker's Revolution Church. For those who don't know, Jay Baker is the son of Jim and Tammy Faye Baker of televangelist fame. There was a whole scandal, so on and so forth.
Mhm.
Jeremy has been friends with Jay for a long time. I came on when Sundance was doing a documentary, and I helped out with their online community to make sure that it was a safe space for, I was a moderator and an admin to make sure that people who were talking about LGBTQIA plus acceptance would not be bullied, doxxed, or any other thing. But Jeremy and I got to know each other through that role. Jeremy is this amazing poet. He's a photographer. He's an artist. His artwork has been in museums. He's self-published like five, six, seven poetry books. He was a music promoter for a while. He has personally met people like Tori Amos and uh, Shirley Manson, and he gave uh, the band that sings the Black Parade. I can't
Oh,
remember their name.
yes, I know who you're talking about. I can't think of their
But
name.
he gave them one of their first gigs as a promoter. This man has led an incredible life, and Jeremy is one of the most beautiful people I know. And I don't want to go into too many details because I don't know what happens in other people's lives, but I had another artist that was going to design the cover, and there was delay after delay after delay after delay, and I ran out of time, and I also ran out of money. So I offered Jeremy a fraction of what Jeremy is worth, and Jeremy had that cover design in less than a day, and
Mm,
it was absolutely beautiful and stunning. But Jeremy has also read all the stories and knows kind of what the book was about. So Jeremy was able to give this beautiful perspective of Cassie that doesn't follow the norm of what you see in YA literature on the bookshelves now, but has a distinct vibe that just enhances the beauty and the intrigue. I've gotten nothing but compliments about the cover. It's beautiful, and it brings me to my next point, especially the last 2 months. There have been problems. There have been things that went wrong. And if I was by myself as a self-published author, I would have been lost.
mm,
And because I have my mental health concerns, if I'm not in check, if I'm not aware, I will spiral. The Bolingbrook Public Library was not the original venue that the opening was going to be in. Fountaindale Library was not it. There was someplace else. And again, I'm not going to say anything bad about them, but I just got an email that said something to the effect of, I'm almost going verbatim here. We will not be able to do the signing of your book, your signing event. Good luck in all your endeavors. It's like, oh, wow. Um, this is less than 2 weeks to go.
Yeah.
I was up all night long, spiraling out of emotional control. And then I reached out to some friends, and one of my friends, Elena, who I mentioned earlier in this interview, she was able to get me in contact with the director of the Fountaindale Public Library, and we were able to work something out. And since I grew up in Bolingbrook and my child grew up in Bolingbrook, um, the director told me at the end when we had inked everything and we had this all settled, he said, "Welcome home."
Wow.
And the biggest lesson that I learned from that, whether you're self-published or with an independent or with a small publisher or even with a large publisher, everything that has gone wrong in the process of making this book, and there are 3 or 4 other points where things went terrible.
Mhm.
And if I was by myself, I would have lost hope. Every time that something bad happened, it turned out to be a better deal
Mhm.
because the library is so prestigious. It's a wonderful space to host it. And I now have an allegiance with the Bolingbrook Arts Council
Mhm.
and some other groups. So every time something bad happens, that has happened in this, we've come out with something stronger, something better. But every time that came because I did something that's very difficult for me, and it's I think symbolic of the book. I had to reach out and say, I don't want to be alone anymore, and I'm scared, and this hurts, and I feel lost. Can you help me?
Yeah.
And amazing people always come through. And I've got 2 choices. I can either hang on to the things that got wrong, be mad at people, be bitter, or acknowledge, you know what? I don't know what's happening in their worlds. I
Yeah.
don't know what's happening in their lives. What I do know is that when I had a problem, beautiful people came and I wasn't alone. Ford, Cassie, Jenny, they don't exist, but they're not alone. And
Mhm.
as you know, whenever we read books, these characters become our friends.
Yes.
I remember when I read Restaurant at the End of the Universe,
Mhm.
I thought that was the last book ever for hitchhikers. And I was sad to not be able to see my friends anymore.
Mhm.
Which is a side note, Ford Prefect from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy has nothing to do with this character. Um, my middle name is LaFord,
Okay.
and that was my grandfather's first name, and it's my child's middle name. So I just, when I was trying to name the character, I wanted something unique, and I'm like, we're gonna go with Ford. And every once in a while, I have people say, like the car, is that your real name? What's going on? Um, and it is actually a real first name that some people have, as
Oh yeah.
proven through Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So there's a history behind Ford, but it has nothing to do with Ford Prefect, even though I have so much love for that story. But the main point here is it only seems hopeless when you're alone.
Mhm.
And you get through this together. And when you try to do a book or an album or any other artistic dream that you have, don't do it alone.
Yeah.
Make sure you've got good people. And if something goes wrong, it's okay to spiral. It's okay to feel lost because this is your baby. This is your dream. This is your passion. But
Mhm.
don't force yourself to be alone. It is so hard to reach out. You, especially if you have problems or you've got a past. Oh, it's my fault. Oh, I'm a bad person. Oh, I'm incompetent. Oh, I'm inadequate. Oh, I'm too much and I'm not enough. No, God, no, you are not. If Mr. Rogers and Gen X taught us anything, you are beautiful exactly who you are. And I like you for who you are.
Exactly.
And every time that I have been at my darkest, it's been a self isolated cell. There have always been people that were there for me when I just cried help. And some people aren't going to be there for you, and it hurts and it's confusing, but you can't dwell on that because here and now, I'm having a conversation with you. Here and now, Tawn is busting her ass to make this dream come alive. Here and now, Elena and the director of the Bolingbrook Public Library are here for me. Paul over at the Frugal Muse is here for me. Um, there's some podcasters that I'm becoming friends with that are amazing Gen X women that do some awesome content. These people become your friends. I recently got a shout out from a social media influencer, Can't Buy Me 80s on she does reels and she's also on TikTok.
Wow.
And she's not a friend, but we're friendly and we had great interactions for a couple of months to have her give me that shout out, put together that reel, and it has helped so much and she didn't have to do that, you know?
Mhm.
She can charge anyway. There's just some beautiful people that do amazing things for you. But you got to do the hard thing and ask for it and it's scary. It is so scary.
It is.
And you also can't live by your mistakes or your shortcomings because as we've already discussed, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to have shortcomings. Sometimes you hurt people. And you don't take that lightly, but you can only do the best you can. When I was a youth pastor, I told teenagers that being gay was a sin, that losing your virginity was an unforgivable act, especially for girls. And you were broken at that point, and you could never give that gift away to anybody again. There is no way I didn't hurt teenagers in the 90s. My nickname now is Fatherman because my child's friends reach out to me. I can never undo the hurt then,
Right.
but I can be the dad now and I can write the stories now and I can appreciate the things that I'm doing with amazing, beautiful people now. And any author that looks at each other as competition, any publisher that looks at each other as competition, any artist or any form of creative, they are missing the beauty of together.
Yeah, absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. It's definitely a community effort, and it's definitely the old adage, strength in numbers. It's not
Mm-hmm.
wrong.
No.
Um, yeah. Well, I love that, Pat, and I think um, I mean, I would love to continue this conversation for another couple of hours, but I think that was kind of a perfect note to end on. I'd love for you to take a few minutes though and just share anything else that you'd like to about the books. Tell my audience where we can find your book as far as buying a copy goes, things like that.
Well, it will be on all of the usual online suspects, including bookshop.com. Once is that what it's called? Bookshop.com, the one that helps
.org.
indie authors?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's going to be in all of the usual suspects. It's going to be available through the publisher's website. I'll have a link to that on my website. I'll share it with you once we have that link. It's just right now, I've been keeping everything off the radar so that we can focus on the Indiegogo.
Sure.
Um, the one thing that I would like to say about this is there's a plethora of stories out there. And I hope that your viewers take the time to enjoy this story and take the time to enjoy the importance of not being alone. Um, People often ask me for a reading. And if you edit this out, that's okay. I'm gonna do a quick reading
Oh,
from
please
a
do.
section that people like.
Okay.
Whenever I've done a few test readings. And it's about when Ford meets Cassie,
Okay.
and it's in the prologue.
I love
Um, as Ford made his way through the main quarter of the mall, The bright neon storefronts flashed their sales in bold, enticing fonts. The hum of conversation mingled with the faint clatter of arcade games echoing from the food court below. Every corner seemed alive with possibility, and for a moment, Ford felt a thrill. Each shop was a small, unexplored world, and today he both had time and cash to indulge. Lost in his thoughts, he didn't notice the figure barreling toward him until it was too late. A sudden jolt from behind sent him stumbling, his Marshall Fields bag slipping from his hand. The glossy polo box skittered across the polished floor. "Shit!" a voice exclaimed. Ford turned, blinking in surprise, and found himself face to face with a girl about his age. She crouched quickly, scooping up the fallen cologne box, and stood, holding it out to him with a smile. Her short blonde hair curled slightly around her face, and her electric blue eyeliner made her bright blue eyes pop. She wore a yellow CBGB's tee tucked into a leather miniskirt, her wrists adorned with spiked bracelets. The look was effortlessly cool, undeniably punk, and breathtaking to Ford. "Sorry about that," she said, handing the box back to him. "Didn't see you there. Polo, huh?" Ford's heart raced as he managed a nod. Words formed on his tongue but refused to escape. "Careful with that stuff," she added with a smirk. "Total panty dropper." She winked, her teasing tone making Ford's cheeks burn. Clutching the bag, he finally managed a sheepish laugh. Thanks." She gave him one last grin before stepping back. "Come by, Orange Julia sometime," she said over her shoulder. "I'll hook you up with the employee discount." She was already walking away when she turned around and called, "Oh, and nice outfit. Very Miami Vice." Ford stood rooted to the spot, watching her disappear into the crowd. He wanted to call after her, maybe say something clever, but his tongue betrayed him. With a sigh, he turned and noticed the Record Town entrance nearby. He needed a distraction, and music always worked.
Oh,
So it's just a fun excerpt to give you an idea of nostalgic story and the fact that we've got a very aggressive and delightful young woman.
mhm. Yeah, I love Cassie. She's definitely a great character, and I love that you did a reading, which I hadn't thought about, but it's perfect. And no, I'm not going to edit it out. That was excellent. So, um,
Um, yeah, and just so you know, anybody who does go to any of the speaking events, they are going to get to see. I'm going to reenact for them something that occurred between Ford and Jenny, where people will get to experience how people who are in the deaf community experienced and enjoyed music in the 80s.
oh, I love it. Yeah.
So there's going to be some balloons and a speaker and an opportunity to understand what that looks like, what that feels like. Today, the technology is so much more impressive. There's vests, there's all sorts of other things that are just phenomenal. But it's just a little moment for people to discover and feel something similar to what Ford felt and something similar to what I felt back in 1988. The only other thing that I would have to say is something that I say to all of my readers: stay totally awesome and stay true to you.
I love it. That's perfect, Pat. Thank you so much. I do want to take the opportunity again, everyone, to to showcase this. Like I said, if you are in the Bolingbrook area or close to it and you want to check out Pat's book launch event, I highly recommend going and checking that out. Sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun, and go and support him in the release of this very important, very timely book. And I would just love to know, just one final question.
Yeah.
What does your release schedule look like for the remaining two books, and book four? Is that kind of
Okay. Book two, I hope to have it done and ready for release in October. That is the goal. As you know, best laid plans of mice and men.
right?
October is the goal, and then spring or summer 2026 for book three.
Okay.
Now, book four, its initial release, basically what will happen is book one, book two, book three release simultaneously.
Uh-huh.
The book of short stories, there will be a limited edition bound edition with all three books plus the fourth book that will be a tribute to the fans. that we develop along the way. But then after that initial release, we will then have the fourth bound edition be its own independent thing, because I want everybody to read it, and not everybody has boxed edition money. But I came from the 80s in comic books, and every once in a while with comic books, there'd be something that had a boxed edition with a chromium cover. So we're going to do something fun with that. And so, yeah, sometime in 2026 is when we have book three come out. Book two, and just to let you know, everything's a play off of Blondie lyrics in honor of Cassie. So Hearts of Glass Living in the Real World is book one. Hearts of Glass Fade Away and Radiate is book two. And Hearts of Glass Look Pretty and Die Young, that should give you a hint, is book three. So
Fantastic. Exciting stuff. So the viewers and me have a lot to look forward to with your upcoming releases there. So uh,
yeah, and for people that like the 90s better than the 80s, they'll love book three.
oh, that's awesome. That's cool. I have a special place in my heart for the 80s, but I love the 90s as well. So very exciting. Well, Pat, thank you so much for joining me today and for being willing to come on and talk about the book. And I hope that for those of you that are watching this, that you will reach out, grab a copy of this book, support this project, support the message behind it, and the people that are going to hopefully have something to cling on to as a result of this book releasing. And I highly recommend you check it out. And thank you so much for watching. Until next time, make sure you read more books. And I will be putting links in this video as I get them from Pat uh, to places that you can buy the book and find more from him in the future. So yeah, thank you, Pat. Appreciate you.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate y'all. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, take care, everybody. Bye.